We're going to take you on a virtual tour
of how school used to be. And we're not even going to leave the township to do it. Right here in the township, we're going to be taking a look at and telling you about the one-room schoolhouses that used to exist. And Mr. Kellough is going to join us today and give us an inside look and some particulars and some information on how that looked like.
Ralston School was. It was open from 1922 to 1929, had about 20 kids in grades 1 through 8. This stretch of Huntington Township on 772 is known as Brownsville. Why it's known as Brownsville is because when the school closed, a Hispanic man by the name of Mr. Brown bought the school, and then he started running a cabinet and furniture business out of the school. A lot of people from around here and even parts of Ross County would come to buy their cabinets and furniture from Mr. Brown, hence the name Brownsville for this part of the township.
A teacher's pay was on average $50 a month is what they would get paid for being the teacher in these one-room schoolhouses. And females were paid actually even a little bit less than what the male teachers were.
Mr. Snyder are now standing in front of Hirsch's Fruit Farm. This is on the 1200 block of State Route 772. In 1922, State Route 772 looked a little differently. The exact location of the Thompson schoolhouse is unknown. It was somewhere in the 1200 block, but the school ran from 22 to 33, had about 30 students per year in grades 1 through 8. And there's many stories about Mr. Leo Hirsch driving his fruit truck or pulling his fruit truck with horse and buggy to all the one-room schoolhouses, giving kids fruit. He left from here, and Leo is Katie Hirsch's great-grandfather.
And something else that you guys would like, I mentioned earlier that the school age is from 8 to 14, so basically the grades was 1 through 8. Also in the late 1840s, whenever they established that, the school year was only for 12 weeks. So the whole school year, 12 weeks long, and the big reason for that was the kids were needed to work on the farm and help out their families during the other times and parts of the year. So that's why there was a 12-week year. It wasn't until the 1920s until the state of Ohio established the 36-week school year that we currently do now. In the late 1840s, Ohio's state government established the school systems for the state of Ohio. The school system that they created was for students ages 8 to 14. So basically grades 1 through 8 is what the first Ohio school systems were established that they would go to. Also, we're here at where the Shady Glen one-room schoolhouse would have been. And Mr. Kellough kind of has a personal kind of flair to story on Shady Glen.
The school operated 1922 to 1931 with about 35 students every year. And in 1924, my great-grandfather on my mom's side, Kenneth Daly, and my great-grandmother on my father's side, Rube Cheney, were in the same classroom for 2 consecutive school years. And little did they know I'd be right here a long time later filming about their school.
The Haubeil School is located along Route 23. The family who bought this schoolhouse, when Route 23 was widened, the state bought the house from them. And then after the construction was done on Route 23, they resold it back to the family who bought that house, and that's when they moved it back away from Route 23 from the road, and that's where currently the house is today.
standing near the 700 block of Mount Tabor Road, which was home to the Rozelle Creek School that was open from 1922 to 1931 with about 30 kids in grades 1 through 8.
There was one Ross County superintendent that would visit each of the one-room schoolhouses one time each month.
And on those days in which the county superintendent would visit, they usually had special activities going on. For instance, the research that we've done said spelling bees was a common activity that they would do the day that the county superintendent would visit for the month.
This is the approximate location of the Rube one-room schoolhouse. It's around 2881 Windy Ridge Road. It operated from 1922 to 1931 with about 30 students in grades 1 through 8.
The duties of the teacher, they had to get everything prepared before the start of every school day. The school day started at 9 a.m. And it went until 4 p.m. And one of the duties that they had to do was they would sweep the floors and make sure everything was clean before the students came. Also, they would get the water for the drinking of the students, their daily water that they drank every day. And on this one, the water in which they went and received was from
Mr. Joe Uhrig's house. The description says 3/4 of a mile north. Now, where that was, we don't know, but have to walk 3/4 of a mile there, get it, carry it 3/4 of a mile way back every day before school started.
So usually the older students that was in the school, that would be one of their duties that the teacher would have them to do, was go to get that water and bring it back to the school for the kids to have for the day.
The location of Crooked Creek School was around the 2200 block of Blaine Highway, and it was open from 1922 to 1929. It was one of the smaller schools and housed about 20 kids, grades 1 through 8. The students were grouped by ability and not by age. Since all the kids in grades 1 through 8 was in the same room, one of the younger students could hear and pick up on what the older students were being taught and actually learn at a quicker pace. So it was not uncommon for a third grader to be grouped with sixth graders while doing their lessons.
Okay, we're standing at the corner of Happy Hollow Road and Liberty Hill. This is the location of the Liberty Hill School. Ran from 1922 to 1936 with about 30 kids a year in grades 1 through 8. Real interesting story about the teachers that lived here. Mr. Snyder has some good information on.
How would you guys like if us teachers came and lived with you guys during the school year? And that's exactly what happened here at this school. There was 2 teachers that ended up living with some of the students that lived nearby here at this school because they lived too far away. We got to remember transportation back then. Basically, you're either walking, riding a horse, and there was a teacher that worked at this school that lived in Bainbridge, and so that was too far away to get to school every day. So they lived with a nearby family and students that went to the school here. Also, there was a teacher here that lived in Kingston, and they also boarded up and lived with one of the students' families during the school year and whenever they taught.
This is the approximate location of the Greenbriar School, located at 516 Chester Hill Road. The school operated from 1922 to 1931 with about 30 students in grades 1 through 8. The research I've done says that the wood stove in the middle of this school building was broken. The door wouldn't shut, so the kids would get smoked out once a day or whatever, and they'd have to go outside and catch some fresh air, wait for it to come back, and go learn some more.
We had the opportunity to speak with Mr. Rudder, who currently lives on the property in which the Greenbriar School sat.
Greenbriar Schoolhouse set right here they moved it from Windy Ridge by a team of horses over here and set it on a rock foundation. I had it removed in about the year 2000 because the rock that it sat on, the indigenous brown rock, had soaked up so much water that the foundation was just rotting out of it. My grandparents and aunts and uncles, it's been in the family since somewhere probably in the late 30s. Right after it was a school, my grandparents bought it and made it into a 2-bedroom home, but it was a 1-room schoolhouse, approximately 24 by 24 feet.
We're standing at the location of the Denver School. That tree right there was in the front yard of the school. It ran from 1922 to 1936, had about 45 students every year in grades 1 through 8.
Once a year, each of the schools would have a fundraisers, and the fundraiser that was popular was pie social, and all the one-room schoolhouses in the township would come and do their pie social here at this school. And the money that they would raise from those pie socials, we did some research, and some of the things that was bought was equipment for recess, such as basketballs, baseball glove mitts, and things like that that they would purchase for recess purposes and that they could have.
The Echodale School consisted of 2 locations. The first school, located on Black Run Road, a half mile from State Route 772. This first school burned down, and the second Echodale School was built and placed at the corner of Denver Road and State Route 772.
This is the location of the Bishop School. This was the largest of all the one-room schools in the township. Had about 50 students that would have attended here. So let me give you some interesting information about the conduct of the teachers that taught in each of these one-room schools. If you were a female teacher, you could not be married. If you were married, you could not teach, or if they found out that you were married, you would be dismissed from your duties. If you were a male teacher and not married, they would give you one night a week to date. If you went to church regularly, you got 2 nights a week that you could go out and date and try to find someone to marry. So those are some pretty strict rules there. Also, no smoking, no drinking of liquor, no gambling, or attending or going to any pool halls. If they found out that you'd done any of those, or you caught doing any of those, you would be subject for immediate dismissal. So some pretty definite hardcore rules there for that.
The school ran from 1926 to 1929, only 3 years. But they called in Mr. Milburn Geyer to run the school. And like Mr. Snyder was saying, he was a very, very, very strict man. There's a lot of stories about him standing outside, making sure kids got there on time, visiting kids at their houses. There's one story, a boy named Glen got in a fight at school on the way home and skipped the next day of school because he knew Mr. Geyer was going to paddle him. So the next day of school, he wore 3 pairs of pants. And when he got to school, Mr. Geyer was waiting for him with his paddle and gave him 16 licks to the behind. If the name Geyer sounds familiar to you, it is on purpose. Milburn Geyer's ancestor to Staff Sergeant Josh Geyer, who attended Huntington High School and passed away in the line of duty. Josh Geyer's father, Paul, lives just down the road here on Bishop Hill still. So right here near Hillsheimer Lane on Bishop Hill.
Mount Tabor School was located on Mount Tabor Road across from Clark Road. Unfortunately, there's very little information regarding this school except for its location. Here, Mr. Kellough and I are standing on top of Pritchard Lane, where the Pritchard School was located. It was in existence from 1922 to 1931. It was a very small school that had only about 15 kids a year attend. For students who wanted to continue beyond the 8th grade, the Huntington Rural High School was developed in 1924. It was a portable 2-room structure purchased in West Virginia and erected at the corner of 772 and Blaine Highway, close to where our current bus garage is located. In 1931, the school was moved closer to our present-day campus. This is when Huntington schools became centralized and marked the end of the one-room schoolhouses.
Township. Of course, now we're back at the school. The school, like we said, was built in 1931. It looks a lot different than it did in 1931. Basically, there's been 5 major constructions or additions to our building. In 1958, we added most of the wing to the upstairs. There was another addition in 1980. 1986 saw the building of the high school gym, and then in 2000 we added the middle school addition. Under this roof today, every day, about 1,100 students that live in our 60 square miles of Huntington Township attend this building. Essentially, it's still a one-room schoolhouse. We have one roof, many doors, many students. So while all of the locations you may have seen today were their own location, we still are one township under one roof here at 188 Huntsman Road.
And as a reminder to all of my freshman American history students, this is activity 3.3 on your Google Classroom. Once you go into Google Classroom, you will see discussion questions that I would like you to take a look at and give some feedback on some things that you learned today and saw today about our history of basically our education for Huntington Township. So again, that's activity 3.3. There's a video link also with the video on the one-room schoolhouses that we did today, and then some discussion questions that I'd like to take, or that I'd like you to get some feedback to me on. And as always, stay safe and go green.